Eliza lunged for the black cat crouched near the gutter, her camera phone in one hand. She had never bothered with felines before. They were just part of the city's backdrop. But this time, things were different. Everyone was on edge. Overnight, the cats in the city had learned to speak. Not in meows or growls like cartoons, but in actual human languages. English, Spanish, Mandarin. A stray by the bus stop might hiss at you in perfect French, while the pampered Persian from the penthouse next door purred in Russian. Eliza had been assigned to cover the story for her local news blog, The Urban Ivy. She wasn't sure she believed the reports at first. Then she'd heard the cat perched on her own fire escape that morning mutter something about intruders from the beyond. That quick glimpse of a cat nonchalantly complaining about existential threats was all the confirmation she needed. She grabbed her phone and hopped on her scooter, eager to gather evidence. Now she found herself tracking a sleek black Tom often spotted near the intersection of Clover and Vine. Rumor on the street claimed he was a ringleader of sorts among the newly vocal cats. "Why are you following me?" the tomcat demanded, suddenly turning his green gaze on her. The sound poured from his mouth in a slightly rasping tenor. The spectacle nearly made Eliza drop her phone. I wanted to ask a few questions," she replied, clearing her throat in the hope of sounding more confident. The cat's head tilted in that curious feline angle. He seemed almost amused. "Eliza, right? The blogger from the Urban Ivy?" She pressed her lips together, shocked to hear him speak her name, though she shouldn't have been surprised. Everyone said the cats knew more than humans had ever assumed. How do you know who I am?" A low, playful rumble came from his throat, as though he might laugh. "We've seen you around, tapping away on your phone or scribbling in that worn-out notebook. Humans think we pay no attention, but we are a watchful species. It's part of why we're trusted with certain secrets." Her pulse quickened. She could barely believe she was conversing with a street cat. "You said trusted with certain secrets. What does that mean?" His golden eyes narrowed. She felt as if she were being assessed. "My name is Shadow Fang," he began, "and until last night none of us cats ever expected the day would come when we'd speak. But the city's wards broke, and with them, everything is different." Eliza blinked. Wards? She had no idea what he meant. Wards was something out of a fantasy novel. "You saw the moon last night?" he asked. "It was red, yes." "A blood moon?" She nodded. She remembered the photograph she took of it from her window, thinking how uncanny it looked above the city's rooftops. "Cat magic is older than you can imagine," Shadowfang said, tail flicking. "We guarded an ancient secret, a boundary that kept certain darker powers at bay. But last night, something changed. The boundary was torn. A car screeched by, followed by a group of teenagers shouting and laughing. They paid no mind to the woman crouched on the sidewalk or the cat lecturing her in a rough, near-human voice. Elisa's heart hammered in her chest. She was enthralled, terrified, but also oddly determined to learn more. If this was real, and it sure seemed to be, this was bigger than any blog post she'd ever written. "Is that why you and, well, every cat in the city can suddenly talk?" she asked. "It allowed us to reveal the truth to you," Shadowfang replied. "But speaking is only the beginning. There are more secrets that will come to light if the wards remain broken." His ears flattened. Terrible secrets? Her phone was already recording. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, mind whirring. "You keep mentioning a threat. Should we be worried?" Shadowfang's whiskers trembled. "Think of catfolk as sentinels. We watch, we guard, we keep certain things hidden. Why do you suppose cats prowl the night? Why do we vanish into alleys? Our vigilance was invisible to you humans. Now it's out in the open." He stared past her, as though hearing something. "A group known as the Onyx Circle has been meddling with the wards. They want to harness the city's energy for dark magic, magic older than time. The wards protected us from them. Now the wards are gone, and they grow stronger. Eliza had 1,000 questions, but the cat bounded away before she could voice a single one. With that, Shadowfang slipped into the mass of moving feet along the sidewalk, skillfully weaving around sneakered ankles and rolling luggage. If he wanted to hide, she'd never find him again on her own. She turned off her phone recorder, adrenaline pumping. "Onyx Circle," she said aloud to herself, hoping to anchor the name. She typed it into her phone's notes. This might have been the strangest morning of her life, but once the shock wore off, her journalistic instincts kicked into high gear. The next day, Eliza walked the labyrinth of side streets behind the old library. Through social media, she'd learned that the library staff had reported a tabby cat snooping around the restricted archives. Gossip spread on every corner. The city's cats held clandestine gatherings at night, some in the grandiose library halls after hours, others perched on the high roofs of abandoned warehouses. Reports of black-robed figures crossing paths with these cats made the rumor mill churn even faster. It was evening when she spotted a skinny grey cat meowing at the library's locked side entrance. The cat's meow carried an odd, urgent tone, as if summoning someone. Maybe it was summoning her. Sure enough, the cat turned its round eyes on her and uttered a surprisingly refined voice. "You," with the small notepad, "come over here." Eliza glanced around. The alley was deserted, except for the stale smell of stacked trash bins. "I guess you're talking to me?" "Obviously," the cat said, tail flicking. "I'm Smokefoot. I hear you're searching for the truth. You want to know about the Onyx Circle, yeah?" She walked closer, uneasy but curious. "That's right," Smokefoot hissed, only slightly, more out of tension than threat. "I've heard rumors the Circle's influence extends well beyond the city. They want to break our guardianship and unleash magic that will poison the entire region if left unchecked." Eliza's brow furrowed deeply. She thought about the endless city spires, the throngs of people, the graffiti-laden subways. So this Onyx Circle is behind the wards breaking. A chilly wind gusted. Under the flickering street lamp, Smokefoot's pupils went wide. The wards existed to disguise, to protect, to keep the city's magic folded away. It's not just about cats talking. Each ward was woven by an archmage centuries ago. The city's lifeblood, imagine it as a well of energy, was sealed off to keep it from exploitation. Until last night, cats were the only creatures aware of it. Now the Onyx Circle found a way to damage it so thoroughly that even we were forced into the open. She typed quickly on her phone, capturing every word. Her breath misted in front of her. Smokefoot continued. "I'll show you something if you promise not to draw too much attention." He turned to face the library door. Old, ornate symbols glinted faintly on its bronze surface. Eliza had never noticed them before. "Look here. See that spiral in the corner? That's a protective rune. It used to glow when a cat approached." With a paw, he gestured to a chipped section. "Now it's broken. That's how the Onyx Circle is defacing the wards, shattering runes all across the city. Want proof? We can slip inside." Eliza wiped her clammy hands on her jacket. Breaking into a public building after hours wasn't exactly on her to-do list, but journalistic curiosity nudged her forward. Smokefoot jumped nimbly onto a stack of crates, then onto a ledge, and finally onto a narrow sill, where he pawed at a small broken window. It wiggled open just enough for Eliza to follow. Reluctant but resolute, she hoisted herself up and squeezed in behind him. The musty library corridor was dark, quiet, and smelled of lemony Polish and old paper. Eliza could hear her own heartbeat pounding. Smokefoot led her into a secluded room lined with towering shelves. There, under a single dim light, a wide oak table held a scattering of ancient tomes. "We found records here that go way back," said Smokefoot. thousands of years before this city was ever built. The texts mention a goddess named Ariaxis who forged the wards, forging them with illusions to hide the city's latent magic. Ariaxis bound the cats to ensure we would always stand guard. The Onyx Circle has been waging war in secret, waiting for a chance to corner that power for themselves. Eliza ran her fingers over the crack leather binding of one tome. Cat guardianship. So you all share this knowledge telepathically, or do your parents teach you? How does it work? We're attuned to it by our birth, he explained. Information is handed down in subtle ways. Instinct, memory, certain rituals in the moonlight. We never needed words to communicate with each other, but the ward's breakdown compelled us to speak with humans. We can't protect the city alone anymore. He hopped onto the table, setting his paw gently atop an enormous volume. The inscriptions are in an old script. Translations exist, half lost in library archives, but we've pinned down enough to understand that the Onyx Circle's next strike will target the center of the city. They plan to harness the energy lines that converge beneath. Before he could finish, a sudden noise echoed down the hallway, the distinct scuff of shoes on marble floors. Smokefoot froze. Eliza whipped off her phone's flashlight. A silhouette appeared in the doorway. Dressed in dark clothes, the figure's face was hidden by a hood. "Step away from the texts," the stranger commanded quietly, voice echoing with a faint reverb that set Eliza's nerves on fire. Smokefoot's back arched. "What do you want?" Eliza said, her voice shaking but firm. "Those volumes are not yours to read," the stranger whispered. "The Onyx Circle forbids it." Almost as if on cue, two more hooded figures materialized behind the first. Eliza realized she was cornered. Worst of all, she had no idea how far these conspirators would go to protect their secrets. "We need to run," Smokefoot whispered. His tail flicked anxiously. Eliza's instincts screamed in agreement. Holding her phone like a makeshift flashlight, she sprinted for the exit. The cat darted ahead, leading her through the shadowy aisles. Angry shouts rose behind them. A sudden whoosh indicated a wave of some intangible force barreling down on them, slamming books off the shelves. She ducked just in time to avoid a tome that whizzed past her head. She and Smokefoot headed back toward the side window. She squeezed through, ignoring the sting of glass along her arms. One more burst of crackling energy soared past them and shattered a crate. A splintered chunk nearly knocked her aside. Smokefoot hissed, spitting in fury, before he vaulted onto the pavement. Eliza tumbled out after him, catching her breath in the cool air outside. Adrenaline surged through her. She grabbed her phone, heart thudding. "Got them on camera shadows at least," she muttered, checking if the harrowing moment was recorded. Indeed, the hooded shapes were partially visible on the video. "They're real. This is insane." Smokefoot's tail bristled. "If the Onyx Circle is willing to attack us openly, it means they're close to completing their ritual. Nothing would force their hand like that unless they were desperate." The days that followed were a frenetic clash of curiosity and chaos across the city. Reporters from major outlets scrambled to interview talking cats, though many humans dismissed the idea that these felines had anything substantial to say. "It's a trick," some declared, or "global hoax," others insisted. Even so, the cat phenomenon was undeniable. Even city officials argued on television whether new laws were needed to regulate cat speech. Eliza's blog post drew record hits once she described her run-in with black-robed conspirators in the library. She also found that not all felines were united. Some roamed off in their own cliques, refusing to discuss wards or conspiracies, claiming cats had no interest in meddling with human politics. But more and more she encountered cats who spoke of ancient guardianship. One day, while sipping coffee at a corner cafe, Eliza felt a brusque tap on her ankle. She looked down to meet the eyes of a massive ginger cat who introduced herself as Saffron. Saffron carried an air of authority. Her bushy tail twitched with impatience. "I was told you're investigating the Onyx Circle," Saffron said in a clipped tone. "That's right," Eliza replied, leaning down to hear her better. "They've decided to accelerate their plans. They're preparing to chant an invocation in the city's oldest subway tunnels, where the lines of power converge. You recognize these lines as the paths that trains travel, but below even those, the city's essence runs like a river. Eliza thought of the old stops that had been decommissioned for decades. Some said entire ghost stations existed beneath the city's bustle. And what's going to happen if they complete the ritual? Saffron's ears flattened. They'll open a gateway, to where we're not entirely certain. But from the old texts, we suspect it's a dimension that thrives on chaos, a realm of nightmares. Once open, the city's energies will be drained, used to feed monstrous entities from beyond. Eliza barred her teeth, forcing herself to remain calm. She offered Saffron a piece of turkey from her sandwich. The cat accepted it graciously. Okay, so how do we stop them? Saffron swallowed. We can't do it alone. We need humans who believe us and who can help with certain logistical tasks. Eliza was almost afraid to ask. Like what? Saffron's gaze flicked across the street. The old tunnels were sealed decades ago. We require someone who can open them and help us navigate. We have the knowledge of where wards should be restored, but we'll need your hands to set the restored runes in place. Magic alone won't hold unless we apply the runes physically to the broken seams. At that moment, a cluster of passers-by paused to gawk at the speaking cat. Eliza lowered her voice, urging Saffron to continue quietly. We can gather the cats who still remember the old invocations, Saffron explained. Shadowfang, Smokefoot, and others who remain loyal to Ariaxis's cause. But you, Eliza, can rally your fellow humans, particularly those who aren't under the Circle's sway. Spread the truth. Show them the footage. Let them see that a threat looms. Any help you can muster will be needed when we infiltrate the tunnel. Eliza reached out to her small network of friends and colleagues. Some wrote her off as paranoid, but a handful were convinced by her recordings of talking cats and hooded mages hurling magical attacks. They convened in a cramped loft one evening, discussing an improvised plan. Okay, said Jeremy, a freelance videographer. We can film a short documentary about the cats, compile the library footage, the interviews, the runes, whatever we've got. Post it online and hope it gains traction. Maybe that way more volunteers will come forward. A wiry woman named Carmen, who ran a local historical society, chimed in. I know a city council member who might believe me if I show her these runic documents. We might be able to get official permission to break into the old tunnels. Eliza nodded, glancing down at the half-dozen cats around them. Shadowfang, Smokefoot, Saffron, and a few others who had shared the guardianship vow. Is that workable? Shadowfang cleaned a paw. Yes, but time is short. The next major lunar event is in 3 nights, and that's when the Circle's powers are at their peak. All right, Eliza said, exhaling slowly. We need to move fast. Jeremy, Carmen, do your thing. I'll gather more evidence. Cats, can you map out the route underground? Smokefoot's tail flicked in affirmation. We have the layout, just hurry. In less than 48 hours, Eliza's phone erupted with notifications. The documentary Jeremy posted surged in virality. Blog sites reposted it. Social media was abuzz with claims of feline allies versus dark occult. Predictably, trolls abounded, mocking the notion of ancient wards and magical cats. But enough open-minded citizens took it seriously that volunteers began contacting her, and the hesitant city council member, intrigued by the wave of chatter and the potential PR of a groundbreaking news item, authorized limited access to a disused subway entrance near the old shipping district. Eliza, armed with a battered backpack full of copied runes, flashlights, and spare phone batteries, led a ragtag group of about 15 humans, accompanied by a small legion of cats. As they pried open the rusted gates to the subterranean passage, a foul, musty air, they ventured down steep steps, slick with condensation. The clang of their footsteps echoed unnaturally. Ahead, faint lights flickered near the bottom. Guttural chanting reverberated through the corridor, sending shivers up Eliza's spine. They emerged onto a wide concrete platform with the remains of old tracks. At the far end, the onyx circle had indeed gathered. Hooded figures formed a ring around a swollen black orb of crackling energy. Runes in swirling purple light shimmered along the walls, throbbing ominously. The cats hissed in unison. The leading figure turned, lowering his hood to reveal an older man with deep-set eyes, a silver amulet glimmering at his neck. "This place belongs to us now," he intoned, voice magnified by the swirling magic. "We have come too far to be stopped by a handful of meddling cats and their foolish supporters." A slow, menacing grin crept onto his face as he raised his arms. The black orb pulsed, sending a wave of dark energy across the platform. Bent lampposts quivered, loose gravel rattled across the floor. The group of volunteers faltered, trembling at the raw power. Eliza nearly stumbled, but Shadow Fang pressed against her legs, helping her steady herself. Smokefoot yowled. "Everyone who can hold a rune, do it now!" Eliza yanked a small stone plaque from her backpack. Hastily etched onto its surface was a protective symbol that the cats claimed would help mend the wards. All around her, the volunteers placed similar runic plaques at intervals along the walls. Each time a plaque attached to the wall, it glowed bright white. The onyx circle realized what was happening and attacked, launching arcs of violet lightning that crackled around them. Shouts rang out. Some volunteers ducked while others pressed the runes into place, ignoring the searing blasts that flew overhead. The cats scattered. Saffron and Smokefoot worked together, weaving between the road mage's legs, biting at ankles or scratching shins to disrupt the chanting. Shadow Fang confronted the circle's leader, slashing at his cloak. The man snarled and hurled a sphere of darkness that exploded at the cat's feet, sending him skittering backward with a yowl. Eliza hurried to the far side of the chamber, breath rasping from the swirling dust and ozone-rich air. A final open crack in the wall glowed with malevolent purple. She had one last rune plaque in her hand, trembling with the sheer, surreal weight of everything. She closed her eyes, recalled the words Shadowfang taught her, a short invocation in an ancient dialect. She whispered the syllables, pressing the plaque to the crack. The plaque heated under her fingers. It began to shine like a tiny star, and threads of pure white light laced across the broken seam. An ear-splitting keening filled the air, as though something monstrous was being torn away from the city's soul. The black orb at the center flickered. "Yes!" Shadowfang shouted, limping toward her. "Keep going!" Behind them, the circle's leader roared in fury. He stretched both hands over the orb, feeding every last ounce of dark magic into it. The purple boundary roiled, but the renewed wards flared brighter, forging an interlocking grid of pale luminescence across the station walls. One by one, the circle's hooded figures collapsed, their energy reserves drained in the fight. The amulet around the leader's neck cracked. He howled, staggering back as the orb imploded, sending a shockwave of harmless sparks across the platform. The runic plaques glowed intensely for a moment longer, then the entire station shifted into stillness. The chanting was gone. The swirling magic vanished. Bits of rubble and debris clattered to the floor, filling the silence. Shadows receded like water draining away, revealing battered columns and old tiled murals. The cats gathered, some nursing scrapes and singed fur, but all alive and proud. Eliza felt her legs threaten to buckle with relief. She sank to her knees, phone still clutched in her hand. She looked around at the volunteers, exhausted but elated. Slowly they rose, gazing at each other with disbelief and something like hope. In the corner, the Onyx Circle's leader collapsed in a heap, his hood falling away to reveal a gaunt, sweat-soaked face etched with resignation. The rest of his acolytes had fled or lay unconscious. "It's done," Smokefoot declared, voice trembling with the aftershock of magic. "We've renewed the wards here. The city's heart is safe again, at least for now." Shadowfang let out a ragged purr, still limping. "We owe our thanks to you, Eliza. To all of you. Without your hands, your willingness to place the runes, we couldn't have mended the wards alone." Eliza felt a rush of emotion. She ruffled Shadowfang's fur lightly. "We wouldn't have even known the threat existed if you cats hadn't spoken up." Recovery was slow but sure. Over the following days, authorities took the Onyx Circle's leader into custody, though many in power struggled to understand the true nature of his crimes. Most ironically, while mainstream media had scrambled to sensationalize the city's miracle cats, few realized that the real crisis had been a whisker away from unleashing unimaginable horrors. In the weeks that followed, the cats continued to speak, but the sense of urgency dulled. Their relationship with humans had changed forever. Some cats remained aloof, returning to their typical feline detachment. Others, like Saffron, Smokefoot, and Shadowfang, continued forging alliances with people who showed an interest in preserving the wards, ensuring they remained strong. Eliza's blog outgrew its modest beginnings. She continued writing about city life, focusing less on gossip and more on the hidden wonders that thrived in the cracks and corners of the metropolis. She always had time to interview her feline sources, though now the cats were more selective about which matters they chose to divulge. They still had secrets centuries old that might never be spoken aloud. Yet they had become guardians, not only in silent vigilance, but in active dialogue with the city's human inhabitants. One evening, as she sat on her apartment's fire escape, the air cool and fresh, she noticed Shadowfang perched beside her. She offered him a pat on the head, ignoring his prideful swish of the tail. They stared at the skyline, lights glimmering like fallen stars. "I guess things will never be the same now that cats can talk," she mused aloud. He gave a soft meow that formed into words. "That's not a bad thing, you know. Understanding fosters unity. Cats and humans will learn to watch over each other in ways we never did before." She thought of the night spent exploring subterranean tunnels and archaic runes. "You said the wards were restored, but are they permanent?" Shadowfang's whiskers twitched. "Nothing magical is truly permanent. All spells, all wards, need maintenance. That's why we must remain vigilant. Together this time." He flicked his tail gently against her arm. Eliza nodded, resolve. Penned on a notepad beside her were new wonders yet to be described. A city where felines whispered warnings of dimension rifts, where robed figures lurked in downtown shadows, and where a journalist on a scooter might chase a tabby across an intersection for the next big story. She smiled to herself, feeling equal parts awe and anticipation for the days ahead. A breeze ruffled her hair. In the distance, a chorus of cat voices rose, as though carried by the wind. It was a new city song, one of whispered secrets, quiet guardianship, and shared magic pulsing amid concrete towers. The boundary between mundane and arcane had thinned, allowing revelations to spill forth. As the night grew deep, the cats patrolled the sidewalks and rooftops, meowing in human tones, both watchmen and historians, bridging the gap between myth and reality. Eliza closed her eyes, letting herself be lulled by the chorus of echo. She couldn't say what revelations tomorrow might bring, but she knew one thing for certain. Whenever the city faced a threat lurking in alleyways or creeping beneath the subway rails, the feline protectors would be there, guardians of magic and watchers of the night. And the humans who had come to believe in them through the bizarre, spellbinding events of that last month would be right there beside them, forging a future where secrets were shared, wards were upheld, and the city's hidden heart beat strong in every urban sunset.